there is a thing called the document. Within that, there is a function, or what I think of sometimes for short term in my brain as an action, a function called query selector. Within that, within documents, there's also a thing called style. Within that, there's also a thing called background color, and that helps me to think of things like an analogy I use is like within me I run, and like if running were a thing that it could just be in me, you could go Molly.run. Style spandex like there's could do this whole nested thing because there are attributes within me as an element, and that's my mental model of this thing. At first, I had a lot of difficulty with like what does dot query selector eat? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
God dang it! No, but so that's my mental model. If that's useful to you, I just want to offer it up as a thing. Is that wrong?
No. That's not at all.
Part of the reason I was suggesting this is because when you expand style, you see a lot of stuff in it.
Yeah.
And one is a way of getting familiarity with what the language is like, what's available to you. But then the one thing that you may not change ends up being highlighted the way Alex was scrolling through, and you saw one of these fields had value.
Right.
So it suggests also what type of thing you can do and what it expects. So it's not to spend a lot of time studying this in detail, but then occasionally, as you play around, come back and look at it. And to notice one, if you go all the way up the stack and you look inside documents, it says not only fields that you can assign what they are, you can also say, are there functions that you know that are native and one of them is query selector.
Right.
The document within it has a function that you can use, and that function has a value. Right? So everything ends up being a dictionary within the browser. Everything is a dictionary of this type.
Yeah.
And what's really lovely about this development is that within the console you can poke around. And sometimes at the beginning it's confusing because a lot jumps out, pours out when you poke around. So have someone maybe sit next to you, do that, and you gradually that you can do it on your own.
Yeah.
From there, jump to source files or jump to documentation.
Yeah. And there's about an hour's worth of a screencast going through kind of an analogous process that we've posted. So if you find that this just live recording is way too slow for you, feel free to watch that one. It goes through and provides the code at each state, at each timestamp.
Before we go further, I want your own personal thoughts on these convenient things within CSS, pseudo-selectors.
Yeah.
How do you think about them as you imagine project sizes getting larger?
Sure.
And do you want to use them? How do you use them? And when do you want to using JavaScript for getting it
Yeah.
the structure?
The thing I really like about CSS in general, and the reason I also err on the side of CSS, is that I find it much easier to reason about declarative things, about things where I don't read the CSS from top to bottom, right? It's not like, first this happens, then this happens, then this happens. CSS is saying all of these things are true all the time, right? And so, although there can be conflicts like the one that I showed before, I find that much easier to reason about. The downside, like actually when Connie and I were working yesterday, we had this experience or Monday, where a hover pseudo-selector was continuing to apply even after we had via JavaScript, or via CSS I mean, moved an element out from underneath my mouse because of like a small edge case of the fact that until you move your mouse again, the browser doesn't recheck what's getting hovered over. So there are weird things like that. That mean that sometimes I end up having to use JavaScript, but to the extent that's possible, I really appreciate how much you can do with CSS because it is easier, for me at least, to reason about. And then but as soon as I want to interact with somebody, as soon as I want to interact with an API or with a user's just behavior, a mouse, a keyboard, or anything like that, I often find myself putting more and more into the JavaScript. But even then, as opposed to doing something like document.querySelectorBody.style equals, I might say document.querySelectorBody, I want to add a class blue to it so that I still keep the information about what's getting changed back in the CSS. Because you could imagine the same way that I can modify the background color in line, I can add classes to elements in JavaScript. In fact, let's do it now. But I could do is I could add a new class called yellow, and I could say anything that has the class yellow, I want the background color to be yellow. And then in JavaScript, so you'll notice when I refresh the page, I've lost my blue in line silent because JavaScript, what I typed in the console, was responsible for doing that. And when I refreshed it, I lost all of that state. I can still do document.querySelectorBody, but now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I want to add something to the list of your classes called yellow. And now the same thing that has happened. I've modified the class in JavaScript. The browser noticed. The browser looked at the rules that it had for the things whose class is yellow, and it applied those attributes. So I find it much easier to reason about this stuff than I would find in a big project, for example, to chase down where did I set the color to yellow. Because when I'm debugging something, I might be able to inspect something and be like, oh, these are the classes it has, therefore this is the way it looks and should behave. And I find that a much easier starting point debugging than trying to step through my JavaScript line by line. Yeah?
And the other thing is that it looks like you have just the files that you start off with is the thing that the browser knows.
Correct. That's
the
right.
one that you look at, elements, is the thing that's being rendered.
Right.
So what you see is in there, but it's not
Right.
in your file.
That's right.
Right?
Do you have a question?
When you do like one of the colors can be disabled by the other.
Yeah.
Like one's more specific,
Mhm.
the other one gets disabled.
Yeah.
Is it that it gets disabled, or is it just an overlap?
When you say overlap, are you asking are they both getting applied?
Yeah, but you just see one.
Yeah, only one of them is getting applied. So your browser is looking at what the conflict is and saying, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point of cascading style sheets is that it's called the cascade. Is when there's a general style sheet and then a more specific one's applied.
Yeah.
On so like anything you set right in the style tag will be overridden by anything you write in style.
Right. And so just to make sure I understand, you're saying like if I set both background color to red and blue, is there some sense in which the browser is drawing both, but we're only seeing the blue? Is that right? It's just it figures out the conflicts before it renders. It says, oh, you're trying to do both of these. This is the more specific one, so this is the rule I'm going to run with.
I think you're asking if I think that's how
Yeah.
mental model.
Yeah.
When you think about a JavaScript file, right? You're doing that one, then you're doing that one.
Right.
Years later, the effect. What Alex is explaining is that there is a pre-process going on.
Right.
So before you even apply the styles, you figure out what's the set of styles that need to be applied given the relationship between things that you have in these files.
Right.
It's an important mental model question because it helps in debugging.
Yeah.
Can you go back to where you did the class list?
Yes.
Is that a style, or did you just make that up? Where
I-
I have a hard time with JavaScript.
Sure.
Like, I think I understand HTML and CSS enough to do business, right?
Yep.
But when I try to learn JavaScript, it messes with me because it's all made up. Like
Everything's made up. Yeah.
everything HTML, CSS, like.
It's true. Yeah.
I mean, the classes are made up,
Yeah,
but there's
yeah.
still a reason why it worked exactly like this and
Sure.
how it works. Like you can go to the WWC and see all the rules
Yep.
and apply them.
Yep.
JavaScript, it's all made up, and I don't understand how the computer knows what class list is supposed to do.
Right. The only reason it knows is because a handful of developers once upon a time, the same way that somebody got together to decide we're going to call boxes divs, right? So like in here, I could come in and I could say, I'm going to use a dog tag. I don't even know what's going to happen now. But yeah, I get a dog tag. The browser, a dog, to be clear, is not a HTML approved entity. The browser, similar to what Benno was saying, is just trying to do the best that it can. So it's like dog, maybe you meant div. I don't even know how they guess div from dog. I don't know.
I think
Is it just
sure
everything that's
anything
unknown?
that's not defined is just treated as a blank.
Yeah. Cats and dogs, all boxes. So the same way that somebody got together to say div is a real thing, but dog is not, a smaller group of people got together to say class list is a thing. My class list or whatever is not. One thing I want to highlight though.
When you say that, you're talking about like the JavaScript libraries, like jQuery.
No.
group of people?
No. So it's weird. One of the things I think is very special
Who
about
are
the.
these people?
Where do they live?
Right.
Yeah.
Very frustrated with them at this point.
Yeah. One of the things I think is very cool about the way that technology, especially web technology, can get developed is that there's this weird like consensus process where in return for the fact that nobody owns HTML and nobody owns the internet, there are these like weirdly consensus-driven bodies of people that get together to decide specification, to just agree upon how computers are going to talk to each other. So once upon a time, somebody did that for HTML. Because you can imagine, like, I hate angle brackets, I want to use parentheses instead. All those decisions have to get worked out so that then, say in the private sector, the people who work at places like Google or Apple, they're the ones who are charged with making Google Chrome, right, or with Safari. They need to have some common reference to decide, I'm going to write some code that's going to take a text file that looks like an HTML file and needs to do something with it. I need to know whether you're thinking about angle brackets or parentheses. So all of these companies have people on these various teams, and they're also just individuals who are prominent kind of contributors who have been writing code and contributing it back to projects, who are involved in that conversation. With JavaScript in particular, there's a group. Actually, do you know how, when you're saying easy, do you know how many people are on it?
I don't know. All I know is that you can submit stuff, and then if you can submit stuff that gets put in a list of things, and then if browser developers decide to implement that in a browser, it can become a specification, and you can, and then it becomes standard on the web. If one browser implements it, then they go, okay, we should make this an official thing, and then all browsers will.
And it's like dozens, it's not hundreds. And I'd never really thought, it's kind of like Congress, except you can't, it's not at all because you don't vote on them. But you can submit things, you can say, please do this. But most of the decision making is happening among those designers who are seeing what people are doing out in the world and saying like, oh, we should make this easier or this faster, we need to add this feature.
Yeah, but for one,
you can't just create it, like create your own functions, right?
Yes.
In JavaScript, is that what you're asking? Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's been some cases, like there has been libraries, like Promises used to be a library that you took and included in your file to write JavaScript, but now it's decided that that's an official thing that all web browsers should implement.
That's right. So kind of the same way, like, you know how in Twitter, the notion of a hashtag, that didn't start as a supported feature of Twitter. People just did that. Twitter saw that it was happening. It's like, oh, we should support that. We should figure out how to accommodate that. So browsers are doing, the people who make HTML and JavaScript, and then also browser vendors are doing something like that all the time. But you're absolutely right that you can make your own function. So class list, somebody else wrote. But the function, you can write your own functions that do the same thing. You can't get them included on everyone's Google Chrome, or I mean, maybe one day you can. But I don't have the connections to bring your own functions to Google Chrome. But from the browser's point of view, they're kind of all the same code that is running on the browser. It so happens that your browser comes pre-built with a bunch of words that it knows, like class list. But you can add your own words to it, and the browser is not like, well, these are Google's words, and they're better, and like there's none of that going on. Yeah.
And I feel like with what you were saying about with CSS, I can go look up a table and say, what are all of the things that I can style about a table? And you can just see a comprehensive list. I think seeing that comprehensive list for absolutely everything you can write in JavaScript would be totally useless. But I find that learning how to Google like the English phrases that will get you what you need is much more of a skill with stuff in JavaScript.
Yeah.
So being able to say things like, so Alec just showed that you can directly go change the CSS and say, in JavaScript, say change the background color to yellow, or you can create a class that changes the background color to yellow and go in and say, add this class to this element. And if you thinking about like which one of those solutions to do, it's like you could either Google, how do I change the background color of an element? And then the way I Google things for this is just like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, like add it to the end of what you're doing. Or you could say, how do I add a class to an element? HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Depending on how specifically you can ask your question, you can like more targetedly get at class list. Like if you knew that you wanted to change the class, you could find class list, but if you just knew you wanted to change the background color, you could search for that, and it probably wouldn't point you in that direction, but you would still be able to find, you would get pointed to some set of words, of JavaScript words that would still move you forward.
Also, most of the predefined JavaScript included with web browsers is on MDM as part of the document object model. It does have all of the if you type in document dot, it
Yeah.
would tell you all of the things.
That's right. And I'd encourage you. I've encouraged people in the past, and nobody, as far as I know, actually takes me up on this suggestion. But you just mentioned Stack Overflow. Choose a number for yourself when you say, after 60 minutes of thinking about this thing, I'm going to force myself to take the 10 minutes or the 20 minutes to post this question, both because specifying the question is often very illuminating, and because then you have this community kind of statistically working on your question. And I know I personally struggle with that, because sometimes I'll think, well, I'll get it. Just another 20 minutes or whatever. But if it's on the time scale, like you could get the answer tomorrow, I often think that is helpful. So.
And also, I think one of the reasons it's evolved slowly, aside from the fact that people need to one of the things about adding things to these dictionaries that are useful, like class lists, is that once you add them, people like them and use them, you don't want to deprecate them. Freely, right? So there are things that get added, people get used to using them, and then you come back later and people have decided that I'm going to remove this out of the language. I mean, you have to go figure out a way to deal with that. So the reason they evolved the study is to make sure the language isn't getting loaded fast. It has a minimal efficiency of vocabulary for getting things done. And you're right, it's already huge. Like as you walk around, there's a huge list for just one element.
And it's even worse than learning like a human language, because for a human language, you can point at the things in the world that you want. You can be like, I don't know what it's called, but like, how do I say that? With this stuff, you can just make up things like, how do I add a class? That's not a thing.
And one of the reasons I was asking Alec for that, I find things, concepts like odd and even, are useful for small projects.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yep.
have to maybe use that in a large scale project. This notion of what's odd and even. I think what's troubling about it is that there's a hidden state. What I like about the way Alec was saying, well, let me put everything that I want to understand in my CSS, like yellow, blue, as classes. It's nice when you can go look around. But things like odd and even, it all depends on what's being enumerated.
Yeah.
What the number internally assigned for something else. So it's fine when you're making a list of 10 items and you want odd and even. But what does it mean for a site that has hundreds of elements in it? Then you have to be very careful about what odd and even applies to.
Yeah.
Not the odd and even the way you use it. Obviously, as a selector.
Yeah, so there are also factors alluding to. There are pseudo selectors that can do the odd and even thing for you, that will count. For example, imagine you're making something like a spreadsheet and you want your odd rows colored background colored gray or whatever. You don't want to have to go in and type odd, even, odd, even, odd, even. So the browser offers some types that make that a little easier.
I'm gonna post in my journal later, but
Yeah.
I've been reading a good series of blog posts about he's going back and reading the actual what's it called, Usenet posts or group posts about how exactly all of this was defined, and about the 10,000 there's at least like 5 different proposals for style sheets, and like you could be writing scheme in your style sheet, and that would be amazing. But
Another programming language. That's cool. So you're going to post that to your journal?
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
Yeah,
Okay.
I guess so.
So I have not forgotten, I meant that we are making a thing to make everything turn blue. So you've seen now that we can style something inline by writing it. I can style something inline by affecting it in JavaScript, either by styling it directly using JavaScript or by adding a class where then CSS takes over the styling. So that now means I could write a function. I could write a little block of code that does what I need in terms of making it turn blue. So let's do that. And I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce another word that somebody made up, var, which is short for variable. So far, you've seen me do stuff like this, where I say, hey, document, give me the body, give me the class list. But you can imagine how, as things get more complicated, I both don't want to have to tell the document, go search for this thing every time, especially if that's a computationally expensive thing. But also, it's just getting long and ugly, and like it might not tell me, like with body, I know what body is, but you could imagine, like with div or with a certain type of class, you might not know immediately upon inspection what you're trying to refer to there. Variables give you the ability to name stuff. So they let you say, give me something, and I'll let you invent a name by which you're going to refer to it for the rest of your life in this browser. So for example, now I could say my body equals that. And what's happening there is whatever's on the right side of the equal sign, the browser is going and grabbing And in this case, it's getting back a reference to the body element. And then, because of what we've written on the left side, var my body equals, it's kind of writing down on a sticker my body and sticking that sticker to the body element. So now, anytime I'm going to reload this page, I can now say, maybe, there we go. I can now say body. Oh, that's actually a bad. Good. I thought I made that. My body now refers to that. And from our point of view, my body is now just as real a word as class list. This lets me do things like this. I can say my body.style.background color equals yellow, for example, which is the same as what we were doing before. So unpacking it, what the browser does is it sees my body, and it says, what's my body? It goes and finds document.querySelect or whatever, and you can think of it as kind of pasting it in there when it executes it. But it lets us just write it as my body.style.
New JavaScript that's basically it's been in development for a while and it's actually out like
Sure.
as of like right now. Like, true. And I would recommend that nobody use var for anything unless they want to target like older versions of stuff, especially like the latest Chrome supports like JavaScript 6 or ES6 to like 98%, and so that if you have, I think a lot would take out a lot of your forks in the system if you use less instead of more.
I agree with that for larger scale projects. I think let and var for somebody's first 20 hours, you're not going to notice the difference between them. In part, just for your information, the reason we chose to use var is that we've been lazy enough that we haven't translated all the materials we've generated into the new syntax.
I've never used all of mine.
Yeah. What I do like about let though is it's more, to me, it is more English. It's like let this thing be equal to this thing. So that's what we're doing here. We're just naming a thing. Yeah.
What is he referring to me?
Let instead of var.
It's the same
Oh,
thing.
let.
Let.
Thanks.
So right now I'm in my script tag doing the same thing that I was doing in my console, but what I'd like to do now is introduce another new idea, which is the name of a function. Because what I'd like to be able to do, at some point what I want to do is like say something like make my body yellow. I just want to say that. I don't want to have to think about how that happens, because eventually what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to have to say, when the mouse hovers over this thing, do this other thing, and I want to name that other thing. I want to name the thing I want to have happen. So in this case, I'm going to call it make my body yellow. And because I'm naming it, I'm going to make it a variable. And now the thing I'm going to associate with that variable is a function. Now a function is just, quote unquote, a snippet of code that you can name and make run, and it has the ability to take information from you. So for example, when I said document.querySelector body, you'll notice that if I just did document.querySelector, it says yes, that is a function, but it doesn't do anything. If I said document.querySelector body, within these parentheses, I'm giving it a string of my own creation. I'm typing in body, and I'm relying on the fact that I know that there's a tag in the page called body. Document.querySelector takes that text and interprets it as a CSS selector and goes and runs it, finds the thing, and gives me back a reference. But it means that I can write in different things here. This gives me the first div. This gives me all of the divs, right? But that means that somebody must have written some code, which at some point takes whatever I give it within those parentheses and looks at it in order to figure out what do I do next. So that list of things that you give a function to let it run are called the arguments of a function. So for example, here, with make my body yellow, I don't need to give it anything. I'm going to write everything that the function needs to do inside the function. It doesn't need any extra information like which body to turn yellow, because there's only one body. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a function by saying function, and then these parentheses are the space I would normally put in arguments, or the space where I'd put in placeholders to let me say, to run this function, it needs a few pieces of information. And we'll talk about that later. But Right now, I don't need that. I just need to be able to say run some stuff. The some stuff is what goes in between those curly braces. So the some stuff that I want to do, and do I still have that class of yellow? Yes. So I'm going to now I have a function, which if I refresh my page, I can run that. So you'll notice that it knows it. I can say, if I just say make my body yellow, it'll say, like with document.query selector, yes, that is a function. To actually run the function, I have to call it, which is like saying go, by adding those parentheses. Now I can run. Does that make sense?
If you hover over the yellow box, does it can we write a code that like change the whole page?
Mhm.
Then when you get like out of the box,
Absolutely.
it will turn white again.
Yeah. So let's quickly, while we're here, do a make my body white. Which in this case, I'm going to say make my body not yellow, and I'm going to remove the class yellow. Because what I was doing before is I was saying, hey, go find the body, add this class. In CSS, this class says make the body yellow. So when I remove that class, that directive is no longer there, and it goes back to whatever it is by default, which is just white. So now I can say, I can refresh my page, I can say make my body, I don't know why not yellow comes first, probably alphabetic, yellow, and then I can say make my body not yellow. So now we want to connect those to the hovering, right, that you're talking about. Before
You're calling that in the little
in the console.
in the console.
Yeah.
You're not. So to make that actually work, it would need to be in a page somewhere.
That's right. So what I've written here only declares the functions. It only defines them. It says this is a new word. The same way that if I said like var x, well, name equals Alec, I can write Alec and alert, and it, oh, that's complicated. Sorry. I can write name. I'm sorry, and it's Alec. It also happens that you can refer to things by their ID in your console, so that's why you saw the div come up when I typed Alec, but you can ignore that for now. So I've defined a variable, but I didn't use it at all until I went to the console. So now we have to use our functions. For example, I could, down here, I could write make my, sorry, and if I refresh the page, it's as though I just set it to yellow, because the page loads and it gets down to the bottom, it defines a function, make my body yellow, and then it runs it, and now the whole body's yellow. So, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Before I move on to the hovering piece, does anyone have any questions about functions in particular?
Yeah, I'm totally lost in some of the syntax.
Welcome.
Oh, okay. Like, for instance, why do you put the curly bracket after the function?
Instead of before,
No, just in general.
as opposed to like this.
Yes, exactly.
Because then I wouldn't be able to say, stop interpreting what I'm writing as defining this function. Does that make sense?
Got it.
I need
Yeah.
some way of indicating that, but the curly braces is like the classless thing. Somebody decided curly braces.
Okay.
So make my body yellow equals function. So that's you're naming the function.
Right,
And then what's inside the curly braces is what the function is supposed to do.
correct. And the weird thing, something to highlight that's somewhat unique about JavaScript, is the name exists independently of the function. The function is actually just a thing out there in the world. Like I can write a function just in here that does something. But to use it, I often need to name it. But the function is just a thing that we'll see in a moment that you can pass around, just like a number or a letter. Okay. So now we're going to set aside making stuff change color for a moment, and I just want to make something happen when I hover over the yellow ones, right? And I'm going to be even less ambitious to start. I'm going to make something happen. Oh, you said even. Okay, well, I'm going to make me even. So before I make it for all of the even ones, I want it just for me. So like with the body, I first have to go grab myself. And so document.querySelector Alex should do that. And in fact, I'll name myself. And now I want to say, when somebody hovers over me, do something. So to do that, we're going to use something called addEventListener, which, like querySelector, is something that lives inside every HTML element. You can tell an element, listen for an event. This is a made-up word. That's misspelled. This is a made-up word that's properly spelled. Mouse enter, which says, when the mouse enters the element, do something. So if you think about like the fence around the element, when somebody crosses that fence coming in, I want to have something happen. Right now, I can make up a function on the fly that just says print out to my console, hi. So now you're seeing, here's a case where I've made a function and I haven't named it, right? I've just written function in anonymously. It's going to be birthed and then it'll die and it will never have a name. And I'm going to do the same for the opposite of this, mouse leave, I think is what it's called. So these are all things that you can look up on MDN for what are the names of all the different events that your browser knows how to recognize are. And for whatever it's worth, you can make your own events. You can make up names the same way that you can make your own functions. Okay, so I'm the second one. Okay. So I messed something up. Thank you. I messed two things up. It's apparently mouse out, and my query selector is Alec, but it's missing a hashtag. So the browser was going and looking for a tag whose name is Alec, which doesn't exist. There we go. And the reason I saw that is because in my console it said, hey, I don't know how to do addEventListener of null. And so what was going on was my document was going and searching for a tag called Alec. It was finding nothing, so it was putting null in the variable name Alec. So when I tried to do alec.addEventListener, it was like go to nothing and try to add an event listener, which didn't work. So now I think when I mouse over, when I mouse out, you'll see in the console it's saying hi and bye. Does that make sense?
What's causing the visual?
My CSS. I will comment that out.
Oh, I see. You were before making the width twice.
Yes, from the previous explorations. So now I'm going to, instead of doing hi and bye, we already have the things we actually want to have happen, which is make the body. Did you say yellow or did I just make that up? I think it was blue. You said blue. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to change this to blue and blue. And I'm going to change this. Oh wow, right, everything's screwed up. Okay, so make my body blue. No, I'm already halfway through it. No, it's not easier anymore.
So he's very good at highlighting.
Okay, so let me make sure nothing, can I actually make my body blue? Yes, and I can make my body not blue. Yes. So now I just want to take away these anonymous functions that were saying hi and bye, and I want to make my body blue, and I want to make my body not blue. And I can do that because I've named those functions. And so now, often I think of, you know that, I don't know if it's a poem, but like for want of a nail, the kingdom was lost. That's the reverse of this. Like you do all of this and you get the screen to change color. Does anyone have any questions about what they've seen so far?
I have.
Yeah?
Is it recording, right?
It's still recording.
Thank you.
Just in what you've seen so far, just to make it clear, like the projects, for example, that Sean was showing the other day, you've now seen like the core ideas. Even if you haven't seen all of the words that you need, you've seen the core ideas for easily 80% of those projects. Right? You might have to look up, maybe you want to do something subtler than make the background color blue, so there are different attributes in CSS. But the plumbing that you've seen, there's stuff in the page, there's CSS styles the way things look. We can change the way things look with JavaScript. I can change CSS with JavaScript. Those are the fundamental ingredients that we're going to be working with over the course of the next few weeks. And there are lots of cool techniques. Oh wait, I didn't do everything you said yet. I just did one, right? You want to do it for all of them. You said all the even. Okay, I think you're being generous, but I'll. Yeah.
So when you say query selector or document or some other kind of thing,
It's let me say this stuff is the function. So it's just they're a mechanism for grouping things.
yeah, no, I get that.
I'm not grouping anything in lines
But-
45 through 48.
In front of that, you're putting function.
Here, you mean?
Yeah.
So you're, just to make sure I understand, you're asking why is this here in addition to the curly bracket, or like why can't JavaScript just do this?
Well, no, actually, the difference between that line where you have function and it's followed by curly brackets,
Yep.
and the next variable down,
This
bar
one.
alloc,
Yes.
where you have document query selector
Yep.
alloc, and then you don't have
Right.
the curly brackets.
On line 45, alloc points to a thing. It points to the element whose ID is alloc. The reason it points to that thing is because I've gone to the document and I've said, hey, give me the thing whose ID is alloc. I'm going to associate the name alloc with it.
Okay.
Right? Up here, what's happening is I want to name something else. I want to name something make my body not blue. That thing is multiple lines. And it's a block of code that I want to treat as a function, not as, I want to treat it as kind of like a verb, not as a noun.
Okay.
And so I need to both group things to say, like, this is where the definition of my verb starts and this is where it ends. That's why the curly braces are there. And I need to indicate it's a verb. So I have to say function. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I think there's also a way that you can directly write like function.
True. Yep.
That's not anonymous function.
Right. So I can also do this. So these are equivalent for most intents and purposes.
All right. Okay.
The only reason that I made the decision to do it this way was to emphasize that the functions are a thing, and the variables, the names, are a separate thing. Like multiple things, multiple names can point to the same function. A function's just a thing you can pass around. But both of these syntaxes are correct and appropriate. And there's in fact a third now, as we were talking about.
I mean that's more. Now you can use
It's true.
yeah, you can do like class and
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
But basically is that functions in a lot of like declarative, more declarative programming languages, functions are a completely different type of like syntax as variable assignment. So you can't say let x equals plus.
That's
You can't really do that.
Right.
In this you can. You can define a function that's like add two things, and
That's
you
right.
can call it with a function. You can take another function that's like two. It's like a number, and a function, and
Yep.
then the function takes the function and does stuff with it.
Absolutely. So, yeah.
Can I just also, I just want to highlight that this is not the way. Like, if someone told me to cook broccoli, I may cook it very different than Matev, right? I may steam it, he may saute it, I may fry it, whatever, he may boil it. But this never would have been my approach to make the background blue with JavaScript. I would have done a different thing using JavaScript as well. So if this is counterintuitive, so Alec often, we diverge in this zone. When he wants to take and remove a thing, a property of a thing, he often removes and adds a class to that thing. And then in CSS, programmatically changes, says in this class, make the thing blue, right? And then remove the class, and so now the thing's no longer blue because it no longer has this class. And then add a class, and then it's blue again because it has that property. I would just directly make the body blue when you enter the thing, and then when you enter the div, and when you leave the div, I would directly use JavaScript to change the style to make it not blue. So, I would never go through the class to change it. So just to highlight that that's the way that we think differently about this phenomena. So if this if his method is not intuitive to you, that does not mean you don't get JavaScript. It just may not be the way you cook your broccoli.
Yeah, it's like working in Photoshop. There may be 8 different ways
To do something, right? So that's something to highlight. And then, I think just the one thing that's syntactically, not related to syntax, but something that you were saying about functions that I like, that helps me a lot, is to remember that also functions, you can name, like functions are a thing that you can name. That's not what you were asking, but the idea of a running being a thing that I can have is like a deep, crazy idea, right? And I think that that's something that's like very confusing, and so that's not at all what you were saying, but it's like an idea that every time I think about it, I find it so beautiful and wild. That an action can, like, it's not actually action, but I like this bad analogy of action can be like a thing that I name and attach a sticky to, and it's a thing in the world. Which he attached it via the word var. But anyway, so that's all.
I like thinking of functions like factories. You create an individual factory that does something to whatever you're passing into it, and then the names are like the addresses of the factories. You have this thing, I want to send it to this address, and when it goes there, it's going to give me the finished product. And then whatever you're giving to it, those are your arguments or your parameters that you're passing in.
Molly's proud. Thanks.
No problem. Any other questions? I'll mention, but I'm not going to show, one other big category of thing that people often want to do is move stuff around. You can move things around the same way that we can change the color by affecting some of the CSS attributes around positioning, which we're not going to talk about in depth today. But you can say, make the left edge of this element be 50 pixels from the edge, or be at halfway throughout the screen. And make sure that it takes a certain amount of time to do that, so you can animate things moving around, or make something follow my mouse. You can do that as well. But it's going to be the same type of structure, so the fundamental plumbing is going to look very similar to what we're doing here. Any other questions? I think we'll take maybe like a 10-minute break from sitting and listening to me. And I'll stop this screencast. So maybe folks want to come back at 1:50. We'll pick up there with some studio time.